Why are we here? We are here because we have been talking since, Governor, I don't know if you remember, in Trinidad and Tobago, we were talking about pre-annual meeting. It was in February. And we talked about a regional effort. So we are bringing this regional effort today here. We gave it a name, One Caribbean. But more important, we give it a content. And to give it a content is very important because we want to do everything. And we could have a list of things, but we wanted to prioritize. And in the One Caribbean, we have 4. People at IDB know that I like 3, but we do a lot of effort and we get to 4. But 4 is still much better than normal. So what is the first one, the first pillar that we are going to be working together? Climate adaptation, disaster risk management, and resilience. As you know, we're going to be part of a panel here on escape clauses, on disaster clauses, but also on how we can adapt, what is the resilience. That's very important for us. So that's not surprising. That's like, it has to be. Second, which is something that increasingly is important, is the citizen security. But citizen and business security, I think in the Caribbean, one thing that we have heard is the importance of citizen security. And this is something that we're going to work. We're going to use the fact that we have a unit, one of the few MDBs that have a unit on security, and this will take advantage of that. Number 3, we're going to accelerate the sustainable development through greater private sector engagement. So we need to grow. We need to have more private sector. We're going to use the IDB Invest, but we're going to also have projects, very clear projects, to enhance the private sector. One of the mechanisms, of course, is having a project preparation facility that we have been doing in some of the countries, in Jamaica, in Barbados, in others. So we're going to use it both for the resilience, for the food, for the citizen security, for private sector. But last but not least, the 4th one is food security. So food security, citizen security, private sector and productivity, and resilience, climate, and disaster management. Those are the 4. Of course, when you deal with the 4, you have cross issues, and we have 2 of them. One is the capacity and institutional strengthening. So we will be working with capacitation, for all the 4, and another one is being able to do a digital transformation. So for each one of them, we'll have digitalization as part of this. So as you see, we are taking an holistic approach. We are not going to be alone. As you know that we have just signed an addendum to our understanding. We basically agree on action plans together. They're not exactly those points, but we have our own priorities that are very aligned to that. So with the CDB, we are going to work together. As you all know, we have also signed an agreement with the World Bank on 3 aspects, on 3K, and one of them is the Caribbean on resilience. So we are not alone, we are with you, with the Caribbean, One Caribbean, with the CDB, with the World Bank, and we're talking about also to include CAF and to have the CAF, the World Bank, and the CDB together. So let me tell you that I'm very happy for these several reasons. For Avinash with us, for launching here or presenting here the One Caribbean, to signing the CDB agreement, and to be able to have you as our host today in this panel. You know that start a panel with everybody is impossible in COP. So we're going to start with you, and then we can work around, and Mia will come, and Nigel will arrive, hopefully. So please, I would like to invite our guests, and I'm going to present in order here. So, Carla Barnett, Secretary General of CARICOM, please come to be with us. You can choose, you're the first one. And Jean Leon, President of the CDB, Caribbean Development Bank. And I'm gonna leave this here. We have microphones, so we are here. So let me start with you. Just 1 second. We get the question. So, Carla, what is the main challenges you see for the Caribbean? What are the main challenges? I mentioned 4 topics. Do these resonate to you? Do we need to, on those issues, think about something different? Can we use innovations on that? The first question basically ask you to.
Thank you. This is on, yes. First of all, thank you for inviting us and having me involved in this important conversation today. The challenges that we face in the Caribbean region and CARICOM in particular, all that you mentioned this morning are important, are clear challenges. Critically, the climate crisis is number one. That's affecting everything that we do. It's threatening to undermine the social and economic gains that we've fought for over the last 30 years or more since we've been independent. All of the gains we make in infrastructure development, in agriculture, in health and education, to the extent that we are circumscribed in what we can invest in education and health because of having to invest in climate resilience and all that the impact of climate change means to us, the criticality of understanding that the impact of climate change underlies every threat that we face at this time, and the injustice, if I can say that word about it, is that even as we do the best we can to adapt, to mitigate, unless the source of climate change, which are the big countries that are the large emitters, unless they change, we will continue to have to increase what we spend on mitigation, adaptation in order just to survive. So for us, that's really the critical challenge, as best as I can put it together, that we face. It is about climate change and the undermining of our future.
Very good, and I think this is very, very important. So for you, Jean, same questions. Are these topics resonate? What are we doing? What are we facing? Can we innovate? What are the challenges?
Thank you very much, President. I think, yes, the topics resonate, but I'd like to probably put this in maybe 2 contexts that you've mentioned. The first is in terms of what's our biggest challenge. For me, the challenge we face is one, the magnitude of the problem is bigger than we are all even estimating.
It's getting bigger.
And so if we are not able to first understand that, then I think we are going to limit our ability to even solve the problem. So that's the biggest challenge. How big is the problem that we are facing? And I want to be able to preface that by saying it is because we normally think of shocks as one event with a temporary life. Normally we say, what's the half-life of a shock? But climate is a permanent shock. And in the space of a permanent shock, it means the entire solution has to be different to that which we are talking about if it's a temporary shock. And so what it tells me is the impact of climate change is more important than the climate change itself. And this impact is so widespread, from social, productive, financial, institutional, environmental. It is so huge that the only way we can conceive of the magnitude of the problem is to see it as a systems problem. And I think you've made that very point, Ilan, that we have to approach this in a holistic way.
Yes.
And as long as we start from that perspective that it's holistic, then it forces us to come to the next challenge. You can only solve a holistic systems problem if you understand the linkages. And so I think the next biggest challenge we face is, as we craft solutions, how do you optimize on linkages so that every project, every idea is linked, so you get optimal benefit from that by tackling all of the, or as many of the impacts in one go. So these are the two, for me, greatest challenges that we have. The magnitude, the measure, the systems-wide approach, and being able to understand and see linkages so that as we design solutions, that design then takes those linkages into account.
So that's a very important feature, which means that not only we have to find the right priorities and to be looking at holistic, but how they interrelate each other, because then we can work several of them. Let me ask you another question here. And I'm going to reverse. I'm going to start with Jean. Let me talk about financing, okay? How can we make financing more reasonable, financing more accessible to finance climate, to finance nature? This is a big issue here where we sit, and we have to deal with it. And at the IDB, we have been working on financial innovations, and we're talking about that. Maybe I'm going to ask afterward Avinash to help us with that question, because you've been thinking about it for some time. And at some point, I'm going to get you too, Penelope, maybe not on financing, but it's something, but I want to ask you to. So, Jean, please.
Yeah. Thanks again for that, Ilan. My sense is, in the same way that the climate issue is a systems issue, I think you have to approach the financing equally as a systems issue. And I tell you why I say this, because we believe at least there are 4 elements that make up a financing ecosystem that is necessary to answer the question. The first is it has to be multi-sourced, because no one institution or source will give you enough for the magnitude of the problem we have. The second is it has to be multi-instrument, because again, no one instrument is going to be adequate to solve the complexity that we need. The third is it has to have an appropriate market infrastructure, because if so, you will not be able to mobilize it. And fourth, you need to have adequate regulatory elements to make sure that it can be done with the appropriate governance. And so when you blend those together, I think you have the beginning of a solution to the problem that you're raising. Having said that, let me quickly point out that in terms of sourcing, I think we have to look, one, at private sector crowding in as one element. We have to change the way we think of financing of investments. I think the dominant solution is, if I have a 100 million investment project, I need 100 million as source of financing. I think we need to rethink this a little to say, how do we use leverage differently so that it is not a one-for-one investment source of funding, to using things like guarantees to leverage up the same 100 in outcome with less source amounts by using, say, leverage for guarantees to get to the same outcome. So that way you begin to stretch the quantum of financing you have to be able to deliver on the same outcome in terms of the investment you need. I think we need to, as a third source, benefit from things like the, as welcome PM Watley. That's a problem. As a third source, I think we need to be able to use available concessional financing, and the cheapest and most available is the SDRs that exist. How do we mobilize more of those to actually give to that combined multi-sourcing that we are talking of, again, for deployment with purpose. So I think if we manage all of those, and in the instrument set, we expand the set of contingent instruments that can take into account the main problem we face, vulnerability and resilience, built into those instruments, then I think we have the combination of multi-source, multi-instrument that can now be deployed with purpose to handle the magnitude of the problem that we are facing. It is that combination, I think, that gives us the option of doing this well.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mia. So I want to give Avinash just 1 minute to talk about the financial. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a great question, especially when the financing that we need far exceeds the financing that's available. So how do we solve that problem? I think that we need to mobilize that bit of large financing that exists, which is the private sector. But the ability to get the private sector into adaptation and resilience is limited because the revenue streams aren't easily acceptable. So we need to get more public financing. The development banks need to be even bigger than they are today. But I think that because the amount we need is so large, that the ability of the development banks to lend on deep concessional terms is limited. The more deep concessional terms you have, there's limited the amount of money you can lend because it eats away at your capital. And so I think that a real pioneering example here is IDB Klima. Because I think what we can do with IDB Klima is you can lend at the rate at which, with your AAA rating, you can borrow at, as close as possible to that. And then say, if you perform on the resilience and sustainability, there's a grant and there's an incentive which lowers the cost of funding, but get other people to fund that performance. I think that you'll find the donor world, the philanthropy world would love that. It leverages their money hugely. They don't put any money in, someone else's money is working, and only if there's a performance and delivery do they have to put money in. And I think that way you will create a new asset class of people wanting to do that. And I think that's the way to lower that cost of capital at the scale we need for resilience.
So let me thank you for that, and thank you for doing this. The IDB Klima is a program where we lower the cost of debt if you achieve specific targets. And we announced yesterday 9 countries, our pilot countries, to be part of it. And we're going to work with that. We announced 9, and they are pilots because there's an amount, a budget of how much concession we can give. But Avinash is right that we are getting a lot of positive momentum where we get the donors saying this is a very nice way of giving incentives, but at the same time generating the indicators that could be able to mobilize private capital, because you can issue then a bond based on the same indicator and you can leverage more. And you mentioned something, Jean, about SDRs and things like that. And we're going to have a panel tomorrow on SDRs. The African Development Bank and the IDB has been for some time pushing for the SDRs to be allocated to that. We're still not there. We are getting closer. The IMF will go to the board, allowing us to be one of the sources, which means that we already have a depository right, but they're going to say that SDR on MDBs is part of the use and they can be used. We still need to convince central banks that putting in our balance sheet still maintains a reserve assets. What we're going to have tomorrow is several central banks saying, if you find the investors, we're going to provide you the liquidity. We're going to provide you SDRs to buy and sell, which is very good because that provides liquidity. And with liquidity, you get the reserve asset. And having a reserve asset, you are able to bring the central bank. So we are doing that, and we also have another panel on disaster clauses, and I know Mia has been talking about that, and I'm gonna stop talking and get to Mia.
Ilan, if you don't mind, please, PM, just one quick follow-up on the CLIMA proposal, because I think it's very close to another idea that we have equally been exploring, which has the same elements, with one difference. For either CLIMA or another broader class to work, you have to be able to price reform. You have to be able to price reforms. Because to the extent that you want to give back after a reform has been completed, it means, A, you need a good means of verification. But equally, if you do not meet the reform, then it means that either the borrower, the government, has a shortfall, or the institution giving has a liquidity change to manage. And so you have to have the market infrastructure to allow you to make up for the time when you're actually going to be making the particular statement. So the market infrastructure I mentioned at the beginning holds. And what we have been proposing is that it becomes automatic, so that as long as you can verify the particular delivery on the reform, you have a repricing of the debt. So in fact, you contract at your appropriate return profile, your risk profile, you implement, and as long as you implement with verification, you have an automatic repricing, and the benefit goes forward to the country or the borrower in terms of its debt sustainability. But to have an appropriate repricing, you need to be able to price the reform that is being done. And that's the more difficult part that we don't have a full handle on. But I think CLIMA is a very good way to start. It's a rebate as opposed to a repricing. And if we can, even I'd be happy to work with IDB on this, work on developing the tool such that you can reprice and get a price of reform, then I think you have a very, very powerful instrument to go forward.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We use our balance sheet, our AAA, in order to better serve our country. We have been doing it in several ways. Barbados have been doing the debt swap. We're talking about Ecuador debt swap, but we started with Barbados, and now we are in a new one with the European investment bank, and we are happy to participate in that. So that's another instrument that we have been developing, and I think it's very important for us. And last but not least, yesterday, I'm getting confused. Yesterday or 2 days ago, we were developing a hedging mechanism for climate investment, so that we get investors where we take care about their hedging needs for currency. And we are doing a pilot, and I know you have written about that, but we are doing a pilot with Brazil. A fund with several instruments to be able to hedge, which is very important for investors to get out of this risk. And again, we look around and we say, yes, we can help. We can help with our balance sheet. We can help with our capacity to issue swaps, to do the swap. So that's important. Mia, we have been presenting here the One Caribbean. One Caribbean, we talk about having a regional program. So we decided that there are 4 priorities: climate resilience and disaster management. Number 2, citizen security, which is becoming very huge. Number 3, food security. And number 4 is private sector and productivity. There are other things, but those are the 4 that we decided the region from the beginning, and they're very precise action plans for next year, for the other, and so we're going to work on that. So that was my presentation at the beginning. So back to you. Well, how are you seeing these challenges? How are you seeing the region?
How am I seeing, sorry?
The challenges, our priorities, and you've been in the public debate, and what do you tell us?
I strongly support the strategic approach you're taking across the region. I have been an advocate for greater coordinated action at the level of the IDB and the CDB and the World Bank with respect to being able to help the region transition and transform. I believe that the water scenario is the most in demand of attention. Almost every country in the region had a distribution system that was put down in excess of a century ago. Almost every country in the region is facing high levels of non-revenue water. Almost every country in the region is also facing drought at different times of the year. The first 6 months of this year, Barbados' rainfall was 50% of its 30-year average.
Wow.
And while the last few months we've had an abundance of water and flooding, the reality is that we are still suffering from lack of water for too long in the year. We have determined in the debt for climate swap that we're doing with the IDB, for example, that we want to be able to take the plant, which ironically the IDB financed 30 or 40 years ago, which was only for separation of solids, to be able to now carry it to full tertiary treatment so that we can use the treated water to replenish the aquifers and also to support agriculture and food security. So that I really do believe that the ability to not only diversify in terms of the range of countries and hence hopefully the risk, the funds being lent, and to keep the pricing down, but also to create a common procurement platform, which is absolutely critical because the scales at which we will order will not command the attention of any supplier and certainly will unlikely get the kind of discounts that we could get if we were working in a coordinated fashion. It would also help us immediately post-disaster because if we're using similar pieces of equipment and similar supplies, then we're in a position to support each other. I use water just as an example, but I could equally be talking about any of the other areas that you're talking about strategically. And I think that therefore that strategic importance to the approach to the region is absolutely critical at this stage. Within the context of the single market and single economy too, I believe that we set ourselves the target, which Guyana has been ably leading under President Ali, for food security.
Yes.
And while we set the target of 25 by 2025, that was done pre-COVID. That was done pre the war in Ukraine that led to the astronomical increases in prices of fertilizer, etc. So I really do feel that the logistics of having and making that food security happen, I just finished meeting with Cindy McCain and the World Food Program, is becoming more and more important in a region that is too dependent on Florida for the supply of fresh food. And whether we like it or not, if a hurricane hits Florida on the East Coast and in the same season, 6-8 weeks later, hits the West Coast, you're going to have a total panic in the Caribbean, because almost every country depends on fresh food supply within a 7-day period out of Florida. What we've been trying to do, therefore, is to see how we can build greater food resilience, resilience in our food supply chains out of Suriname, out of Guyana, out of Belize, out of Venezuela, out of Brazil. Because if we have those 4 countries to the south of us, and Belize and others in Central America to the west of us, then I believe we can hedge our bets in a sensible way that will ensure stability. And why is that important? You talked about citizen security. If at the end of the day we can't feed our people, we've already known what happens in the region when instability starts to spread. So that all of these things are interwoven at this stage, and I want to salute you for your leadership in ensuring that we can take that strategic approach. I also do believe, and I should say this, climate resilience is not going to be real in the region until it reaches the household. And that's the point I was just making in our pavilion. We have to find a way where the IDB and the CDB and possibly the World Bank can work together to ensure that they can deliver at the level of the household now, whether it is working with commercial banks and credit unions on the ground to ensure that the cost of transformation, we talk about transformation. Transformation is accepted and done and pursued by those who can afford it. But there is a whole range of people who would like to be able to do it. But simply, if I'm fighting to be able to feed myself when the day comes, tell me how you going to tell me about a photovoltaic panel or a water tank or any of the things that are necessary, a car that is an electric vehicle. I'm a taxi driver. You understand? Why am I not buying more electric vehicles as a taxi driver when we're buying the buses that way? So I think that there's an opportunity for how the 3 development banks and CAF, 4, how the 4 of you can work together in a seamless way to deliver the green transition to the household and to the community in the Caribbean. And if you can do that, then I really do believe that we can set an example for the rest of the world.
So just to give you, please, Carla.
No, I just wanted to add to what PM Motley said about agriculture. There are 2 aspects of our agriculture development program that require focused attention. One is access to technology, because the way of growing food has changed significantly. We're bringing more young people in, and those 2 things together means that there is an opportunity to expand food production with young people, introducing technology at a much higher level. So that's one thing. The other thing is, how do we manage risk in large-scale agriculture investment in the reality we face of increasing climate risk? It's hard enough to get insurance for the things we normally insure, business operations, housing and all of that. How do we mitigate? How do we price risk in agriculture? How do we get private sector investment in agriculture? Because nobody is asking governments to get in the business of growing food. It's private sector investment. But the risks involved in agricultural investment, as you know, are normally high. They are even higher now. And so that's a particular bit of work that we require some attention on. How do we provide some kind of risk cover for agricultural investment?
If I may, Ilan, Carla is exactly correct. Because this year, what did we find? Our poultry sector has experienced a higher percentage of mortality among chickens this year because of the heat in August and September.
Wow.
Similarly, once the rains came in the latter part of the year, we now have the experience of convection rain, which we've never had before. So you have this intense rainfall, this intense flooding, and therefore it has affected the agricultural sector. And what it then leads to is a spawning of pests and other things which become resistant to the practices that the farmers are using. So what we're finding is that we're going to have to invest far more in climate-controlled agriculture, which means the greenhouses and the shade farms, which means using technology, which means using hydroponics, which means using, in some instances, vertical farming. The second thing that I want to say, which is consequential upon that, is that we need to get the logistics right and we need to get the transport right. And I'm not only talking about air transport, which Jean has been doing a study on, but I'm also talking about that elusive concept of shipping. The Caribbean will only start to function when we build sea bridges that are functional. And Canada would have given us 2 ships back in the 50s that we talk about with affection, but we've not come to work. And I think I may have mentioned this to you, James, and Avinash certainly is aware of it. Look, we need 5 different aspects in the region. We need something that moves traditional shipping between Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, Barbados. Then you need a fast ferry system that moves from Trinidad, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Barbados in the south. A similar one is mirrored in the North Islands on the vertical axis, going right up. And then you need one going west from the Northern Caribbean across to Santo Domingo, Haiti, Jamaica, Belize, Cayman Islands there. And then you need one going north-south from Jamaica to Barbados and Trinidad. So that if you master those 5 bridges, the economics of the region changes, and then the most important part of it is opening up northern Brazil, which you know better than me. When I learned that people in Boa Vista have to go back down to Sao Paulo or Brasilia or Rio in order to go north again, it makes no sense. But then when I remember our history, who was it that populated our tourism in Barbados before air travel? It was Brazilians. The whole south coast of Barbados was full of Brazilians in the late 19th century and up until about 1950, because that's where people came, under schooners. So if under your leadership and Jean's leadership and Ajay's leadership, we can get a framework again that places emphasis on the maritime logistics of the region as lead Prime Minister on the single market and single economy, I'm telling you that it will change the economics of the region forever. And it is perhaps the most strategic investment we can make, particularly now that the world is recognizing that the re-globalization, as Ngozi will call it, depends now not just on efficient and the most profitable supply chains, but resilient supply chains that will ensure that we can protect our people when the disasters that are either human or climate related start to happen. So, and have greater efficiency and competitiveness at the same time.
I completely agree. You mentioned a lot of points that I would like to comment, but I'm just going to mention 2 or 3 of them. One, that Jean was making the interconnections of the priorities of it. You mentioned how food security is related to climate, and how climate and food security is related to citizen security, and how this is. So we need to think about all of this in an holistic way. We cannot just treat them like this is very separate things. And you just mentioned exactly what we were talking about. The second thing is scale. And here the 2 scales that we're talking about. One is scale of the market. If you want to make market larger, cheaper food or cheaper, you need the transportation. And you mentioned on this climate financing and the affordable electromobility, how are we going to get it affordable? Not just, you don't not only need to be supplying it, but supplying it in a way that's affordable. I believe that this will come with economies of scale, in a way that if we have a market that is larger, maybe we have more chance of bringing a larger scale, then the batteries are cheaper. Think about what's happening with the solar panels. They were very expensive. Now they're cheaper. That's, my intuition says that this is where we need to go. My last point, coordination. We just signed an agreement now. We have an agreement, but we signed an addendum on these priorities where we're going to go with the Caribbean Development Bank. We are together. With AJ, one of the 3 topics that we decided this is what we're going to pursue is resilience and climate in the Caribbean. What we need to do is bring them together with CAF, the 4 of us, and say, well, let's do it. And that's something that we have brought. I hate to pinpoint to Penelope.
I just want to leave one other thing on the table, and that is education transformation. Because unless we transform the way in which we're educating our people in the region, we're going to be playing catch up all the time. And we have a system that is meant to subjugate rather than to allow citizens to flourish and innovate. And I think that all of the institutions equally, as you focus on climate resilience, as you focus on productivity, as you focus on citizen security, if we don't have an eye for both formal and non-formal education in the region, we're not going to have the people necessary to propel growth, regrettably. Because the other major factor that is often ignored is that the region is significantly underpopulated, with the exception of Haiti. You cannot drive growth with the underpopulation that we have. And ECLAC has determined, has projected that Barbados will have 1 in 2 people over the age of 65 by 2050. That is a national disaster. Jamaica and Trinidad are at 37 and 39% over the age of 65. That is also a problem. And in both instances, we're already too close to solve it the natural and enjoyable way, so that we have to solve it through planned and managed migration. If not, we're going to find ourselves incapable of sustaining pensions, incapable of sustaining growth, and becoming a region that will both be uninsurable and uninvestable. And I'm not sure that the clarion, that the clear message has gone out that to avoid this reality in less than 30 years, in fact, it's what, 26 years, 27 years, that we need the kind of joined up approach between those institutions that support the region, because very often domestic politics, like in the US, stops sensible decision making. And the only thing that will save it is company. And therefore, the conversations have to be regional, the actions have to be regional to avoid the consequences that will inevitably come as they did in the 1930s. Thank you.
Ilan,
So-
just a quick...
I want to, I hate to pinpoint, but I really would like your perspectives. Please sit with us, Penelope.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Okay, let me just also join with those on the panel in congratulating you on your leadership. I recall when you became the president, you indicated that you will take almost personal responsibility for the process, and we are seeing that you're doing exactly that. I think it's important to note that. I would like to just endorse as well the CLIMA, but I have one concern. You spoke about the issue of performance targets, of course, being related to the funding. As someone who is, as Minister of Planning and Development, and I want to talk about Prime Minister Motley talking about the water sector, for example, one of the issues has to be the gestation period between the signing of the loan, the actual start of the projects, and the length of time that it takes. For a number of reasons, issue of capacity building, the complexities that exist in relation to the implementations of the loans. So it's how do we address those issues, because it means that it's going to be extremely difficult for a lot of us in the Caribbean to be able to meet the targets of which we speak about, especially when we link the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. So I think that focus has to be very, very critical in the mix. And I have to say it probably requires a little more hand-holding, a little more assistance in terms of capacity building.
Definitely.
To ensure that in truth and in fact, what we are trying to achieve, that we do have literally the bodies on the ground who are able to assist us, or because the other complexibilities in terms of the vulnerability index for disaster preparedness, and how do we deal with that debt for climate swap, really requires that we ensure that we build capacity. I know, having been a governor of the bank myself, both of the CDB and the IDB, that the resources and the capacity is there, but in the region, I think we need it, or else that the changes of those lines that are 100 years old, and the impatience of our population now, especially with the challenges with climate risk, where you have, in Trinidad, you can just have 15 minutes of rain, and I mean, the flooding is just impossible to even describe. So I think that's really, I just want to focus on that. How could we ensure that the loans, the grants, that it is actually reaching to the population and those who intend to benefit, so that they can actually see that there is a big difference that is being made. Thank you.
Ilan, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Jean, but I think the moment demands it. All of us are facing the same lack of capacity issue.
Yes.
All of us have the same handful of people trying to do multiple things with multiple institutions.
Yes.
If the IDB and CDB were to fund, along with other donors, EIB, etc., a class team, almost like a SWAT team, of project preparation persons and people who can help in training but also doing at the same time, and that can move across the region. Because if I'm doing something and I'm good at it, I can do 3, 4, 5 countries at the same time because I'm handling it. But what it does is to take the pressure off, because the very principle of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas is functional cooperation. And rather than all of us trying to replicate island by island by island, all of this project preparation facilities, can we not agree that the 4 institutions, along with then the EIB, come together, work with CARICOM, and help us fund a team that literally is available to be able to, and with the technological platforms that we have, they don't need to be in country all the time, so that they can help advance and monitor and ensure compliance, rather than money remaining dormant and paying commitment fees that go back out.
That's a great idea, and actually that's part of in the One Caribbean, we were thinking about capacity as very important. Not sure that we are thinking the way you were thinking about a project preparation, having scale and getting the efficiency from the fact that you're not doing project preparation facilities in Barbados, then in Jamaica, then in other places in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe having one together, and I think that's something that we can.
The truth is that the CSME Secretariat is in Barbados, so I'm more than prepared, and it's next to the CDB. So I'm more than prepared to work with you to see how we can scale up, because it's just not there. And the countries don't have the fiscal room to be able to bring in large groups of people on their own.
So we have here our Vice President, Annabelle. She is one of the mentors of the One Caribbean. I think this idea here, I don't know how much we have thought about we thought about project facility preparation. Not sure we thought about it as a joint, but I think this is a very good idea. The other day I was with AJ here, and we were talking about, and at some point I realized that we are having a bilateral and giving work to the people here. So here we're having another bilateral, a group, and we're having ideas that we should actually implement and we're just starting this. So, Gene,
Yeah,
please.
just a quick rejoinder here. You recall we were speaking a little while ago about the triangle, the fit-for-purpose investment, the financing, and the capacity, implementation capacity building. I think what PM Motley has just said is an exact example of this as to how we need to think about capacity building as an investment in country capacity, not how do you make a project deliver better. And in fact, it is something we have embraced at the bank, and my Vice President Operations here can testify. We are in the process of making that a central pillar of how we advance development. And so with Annabelle, even with Secretary General here, I think your idea of a SOAR team to manage that is a very good point. And I want to maybe add to this, Ilan. Let's make this meeting count. This could be one idea that we could say we want to take forward. But I want to add a second idea. And that second idea is let's get the 4 development banks, CDB, IDB, CAF, and the World Bank, as the financing institutions to agree. And the AIB, okay, 5, to agree that they will work together to advance one key backbone project. I'll also call it a mission that will actually facilitate the development of the region over the next 10 to 20 years. And that one project, which we've talked about a little, is the connectivity project. The maritime transport that PM Motley spoke about is one part. We know air is also going to be in there, but I want to suggest we bundle those as 3. Transportation, energy connectedness, and digital connectedness as a transmission backbone that will connect from Jamaica in the west to French Guiana in the southeast through one, and maybe Belize, yes, coming down.
No, have to have Belize.
Yes, through
You say maybe?
through two mechanisms.
I'm not going to discuss with you the geography.
One is it has to be on the ground to make it climate resilient, on the water to give you the connectivity, make it regional in terms of capacity, connected so you have full redundancy. You can leverage the multiple generation and go for a green region. By that time, solar, geothermal, offshore wind, water. And you can provide for the ability to make economic diversification in offshoot of this, because it will provide the means for every country to be able to advance at the same time without the need for the energy to propel it, build social cohesion and community development from that, enhance it with education opportunities, the means to fabricate, maintain, all at the same time. So you hit all of the buttons of development: production, social, education, research and development, financial, economic growth through that one central project that would unify the region, regional development, common market, all at one time. So let's bring the 4 institutions, 5 institutions, if we add the EIB, make it a 10, 20-year project, which I'm sure PM Motley would be happy to take to CARICOM heads and say, we will do this, and we can stick to it for the next 20 years.
Let's make it 10.
10 years.
I can't promise to be alive in 20.
10 years.
Very good. I want to give you the opportunity. We are getting to the end. I know that there is some flexibility of time of getting late to the next commitment, but let's not abuse. So let's finish around time. So I want to give you the opportunity for your final remarks. I'm going to start with you, Carlo.
Thank you very much. I love the idea of the capacity building approach, bringing the major institutions together. In a previous life, I worked with government dealing with projects, and we would often find ourselves in situations where with each bank, with each development agency, we're looking for individual project managers, including engineers, and there are just so many people. It's not a lack of capability, it's just a lack of numbers because we are small countries. But if we had a way of bringing all of that together and ensuring that we can share effectively information, inputs, that it would make such a tremendous difference to the ability of our countries to implement projects on time, within money, and much better. So if there's a way the banks can get together and do that, that would be the single most important thing that would come out of this conversation we're having here, because it has implications for how well we can implement all our resilience projects or agriculture projects or infrastructure projects, because it would enable us to be able to draw on the capacities that we need when we need them. So for me, 100% behind. Let's see if we can get that done. Everything else is good too, but that particular thing.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. President. I want to also thank you for visiting Trinidad and Tobago and visiting the region. I want to end by focusing on something a little different, which is a communication strategy. The IDB does a lot of good work in the region. I don't think it's sufficiently known. I don't think the impact of what the IDB has done over the years is sufficiently known. It's really critical for what we are about to do. Assuming that the decision is taken, what Minister Motley spoke about and Jean, it is still important to market that project to the extent that those who are the beneficiaries sufficiently understand the importance of what the IDB has done, not just over the years, but what is to be done now, because it becomes extremely difficult to be able sometimes to manage, convince. Too much time is taken doing that. I think we need to reduce that time by the appropriate strategy so that less work is done convincing those who really should probably know better. Thank you.
I have to either. I think the IDP has been doing a lot of stuff and a lot of good stuff and has not communicated it enough. It's also true that there are other things that we are not doing, which we are not also not communicating what we're not doing, but we are also not communicating what we are doing. So I think your point is important. If we are going to go ahead, do more stuff, do the One Caribbean, think about capacity, work with the 5 banks. We need to be able to communicate it in a way that people are aware and that they are conscious that this is the way forward. Jean?
Thank you. I would say get the 5 banks to agree regionally, beyond political party, beyond national, broad regional, to optimize on scale, to agree on 3 key pillars.
I love it, 3.
3 key pillars.
Not more.
One backbone infrastructure that will take us forward and create opportunities to do everything we need. For me, that's the Connectedness Project. 2, adequate and affordable finance that is sustainable to allow us to do all of what we are saying for the next 10 years without a problem. And 3, capacity building to allow us to implement in the broad definition we've used. If those are our 3 anchors, everything else flow from that, and you mobilize the strength of 5 major development institutions to say they are supporting and will drive this for the next 10 years. If we can agree on that, then I think we have the potential recipe to drive the region to another place at the end of the next decade.
Mia?
Thank you. Be our bridge to the Bridgetown Initiative. And I mean that sincerely. Look, if Ajay's now agreed that the debt pause clauses are to do existing loans, and I'm a lawyer, Penny's a lawyer, it's just a mutual consent to vary the terms and conditions of the contract. We need long-term capital for social spending in particular. And what we're seeing in the region, regrettably, is that we're still getting loans for 15 years and 10 years to be able to do education and health and social spending. That really is not sufficient. So we need to change the nature of what we anticipate with respect to the lending that we're doing for long term. And we need to be able to change the metrics on debt sustainability. Yeah? Because with debt sustainability, the trajectory is going to be critical. Hey Nigel, what's up? No problem. Yeah.
For your comment. Sorry, Mia.
Yeah. We need to be able to have a downward trajectory that is much gentler than what is acceptable in a pre-polycrisis moment. And how much ever money you give us, if the fiscal space is not there, this is a moot conversation. And we need to bring the credit rating agencies and the bank regulators to the table, because I'm not satisfied that the message has gone through the system to facilitate the kind of changes that the system demands now, because there's no sense telling me that I can build resilience in 20 years' time when I've already lost half of my GDP on a sustainable basis, when I've lost my population because they simply are not coming back to live in flood-prone areas and they don't have the capacity to stay. Insurance premium have increased to the point where governments now have to stand in the breach for every loss and damage event, and where ultimately governments then become incapable of supporting those losses over a protracted period of time. So I really do think that the IDB has to play a role in also being that bridge to the Bridgetown Initiative, and being able to make sure that the advocacy hits the point of being action.
So thank you, Mia. I love the idea of being a bridge. I've been talking a lot about a bridge. We actually have now Avinash to help us with this bridge, and it's very good. I'm glad Nigel, you made it. I know you had a lot of problems, but we are just at the end. On the concluding remarks, I'm going to give you your perspective on Jamaica. I'm going to tell you what we have talked about. We talk about the One Caribbean on the priorities. We talk about other issues that are relevant, how they are interconnected. A very useful idea just came here. We're talking about having project facilities because capacity is very important. But we have been working and thinking about project facilities for each country. So maybe we can work with the 5 banks, and the 5 banks are the World Bank, the IDB, we have the CDB, there's CAF, but Mia mentioned that the European Investment Bank also needs to be there. Maybe we can work together either to talk about a project or something, right? But in capacity, can we have a joint project facility to have the project and also to capacitate people? So that's what we were talking about, but I want your perspective, and thank you for coming. I know how difficult it was for you to get here.
Thank you. Thanks, Elon, and apologies to everyone. First, I want to just agree with everything that was said, even though I wasn't here, because Caribbean solidarity is that whatever Prime Minister Mia says, I'm with it, as long as Secretary General and CDB President and
Penelope.
Yes, Penelope. Look, we are. It's only Caribbean resilience that made me get through all of the obstacles and hurdles to get here, and I'm happy that I did. I've just come back. I've just come here directly from this AML CFT
Yes.
event in Aruba, where Caribbean countries are all under the weight and the pressure of needing to comply with international regulations. And while I was there, I would have met the head of the FSC in Montserrat, as well as the head of the FSC in Antigua, and the head of the FSC in Dominica and St. Lucia. And it just reminded me of...
So Jamaica is ready for a regional FSC now?
That's what I'm trying to say is that
Take the lead, my brother.
there's so many issues for us to tackle, for us to continue to try to tackle them country by country by country, replicated 13 or 14
Yes.
times across the region, we will get nowhere.
I agree.
We will absolutely get nowhere. Today, when we think about the Common Examination Council, nobody thinks of CXC. I think of CXC as Jamaican. Mia thinks of CXC as, that's our equivalent of, examinations, O levels, A levels,
Yeah.
whatever. I think of it as Jamaica. You think of it as Barbadian. The Guyanese think of it as Guyanese. It's so local to each of us, but it is also it's regional. And I say all of this to say that with the crisis that we face with climate, if we try to attack it country by country by country, we're going to fail. It is much too big a problem, and we cannot replicate what we have tried to do in other areas, whether it be financial services, AML, etc. A regional approach, in my view, is likely to be the most successful. Now, when it comes to building resilience and having infrastructure that has been adapted to the realities of our region, the big problem that we face is the cost in putting these projects together. It might be a little embarrassing, but I'll just share it nonetheless. We have within the government of Jamaica ministries that have been trying to put projects together. In our public investment process, they've gone through the first hurdle to get concept approved, but to develop the project, they need financing in order to hire all of the consultants, environmental impact study, the architects, etc. And that is where the bottleneck is. I would be in full support of a scalable, regional project preparation facility.
Perfect.
We're doing one in Jamaica for sure.
I know.
But if we can, do it on a regional basis and just make sure that we don't have hurdles to access, I'd be in full support of that.
Very
and
good.
IDB is fully placed to play that role.
So Nigel, very good, and it seems that you are agreeing already with what we have said before, so very good. We need to go. We have, I know Mia has to go, I need to go, everybody. And I'm glad that I got Nigel, I got Jean, Penelope, Carla, Mia. Thank you very much for being here.